Welcome everyone to Midday Meditation. Last couple of weeks, I talked about the mind, the importance of being able to manage the mind. Because what's on the screen of the mind is what we're experiencing. So, for example, I could walk down the street and see a man with a canine coming at me. And I could look at that canine and see a scary monster, or I could look at that canine and see a big fluffy friend. So the dog is just a dog, but it's what happens on the screen of my mind, what kind of thoughts am I having about what I see, determine what I actually see. And so yesterday I talked about the intellect. I said the intellect has to be involved because if the intellect isn't involved, we believe everything that comes on the screen of our minds. And we have a lot of arguments with other people because we have different thoughts about something. And all of us absolutely believe what came onto the screen of my mind, when actually what's appearing on my mind is simply um, reruns of past experiences. If I want to have a new experience, if I want to have a fresh experience, if I want to be in the moment, the intellect has to be very strong and clear and clean and active. And often we can hear something really small. This thing happened at my office. And immediately we make up a story about it because the mind is a storyteller. So we make up a big story about it and we believe our story because it sounds very compelling. And there's nobody inside my head saying, well, wait a minute, is that really true? So that's the job of the intellect. The intellect is this little voice inside my head that verifies. And the intellect understands that not everything that appears on the screen of my mind is true. Actually, most of it is probably not true. So the intellect asks some questions. The intellect says, is this really, really true? Do you know? One of my friends asks herself, what percentage of certainty can I believe this with? What percentage of certainty? And she asked herself that honestly. And she said, the only thing that I can be 100% certain about is that I don't have the whole picture. So this is what the intellect has to ask. And then the intellect has to ask, okay, is this true? Yes, you saw this person do this with your own eyes. Now, is this beneficial for me to think about this? Or is this appropriate for me to think about this? These are the kind of questions the intellect has to ask because actually, the most important job of the intellect is to manage the mind. And we see what happens when there's no intellects. We've got people running around with guns shooting each other because the intellect isn't functioning. It's not questioning the thoughts that come onto the screen of the mind. It's not verifying the movies that we play. So the intellect is the part of the self that has to be detached. And detached means I'm not necessarily believing my own stories. And whether I believe them or I don't believe them, I understand that they're just stories. They're fictional representations of things that happen in the world. They're all fiction. And some is good fiction, some is bad fiction, but it's all fiction. So the intellect has to accept that, yes, I am going to tell a story. If I see you every week, I've got some kind of story about you. But the intellect says the story is different from reality. The story is useful. So, for example, part of the story is hopefully I remember your name so I can call you by name. If I forget your name, I can look on screen anyway. But so a story about you is good. It helps us get to know a person better, but it's not reality. And so, if we can understand this, then the intellect is open to learning completely new things about a person. For example, Emily was on when we had the session about powers. You all know Emily. She comes on here often. And she said she teaches basic literacy skills and math skills to immigrants in Germany so that they can she does this as a volunteer, so that they can get good use of the educational system. They can learn better, they can go farther in school. And I never knew that about her, even though I've known her for several years. I always think of her as an artist. And so we pigeonhole people according to the information that we have. But the intellect says, I'm going to be open to learning something completely new and surprising about this person, maybe about myself, about my life, about my world. So we'll focus today on the intellect managing, questioning what happens on the screen of the mind. To begin with, take a few deep, full, easy breaths. Watch the air enter and leave the lungs. As you watch the breath, let the mind become quiet and still and relaxed. I'm saying these things about what you can do with your mind, but actually, if you agree with what I say, then it's your intellect that tells the mind. It's an instantaneous thing. But if you agree, then it's your intellect that's telling the mind. Your own intellect is the manager of your mind. We can't manage another person's mind without the intellect agreeing. So I'm saying to let the mind become quiet and peaceful, and then your intellect is giving an instruction to your mind. The intellect is very incognito most of the time. The intellect is very good at giving instructions to the mind. It's not difficult. The difficulty is that sometimes the ego doesn't agree. And then the intellect has to convince the ego. Bring your awareness to the inner being, the invisible soul behind the forehead. See yourself as a tiny being of light. I am the peaceful soul who lives in this body. Now, most thoughts appear from our subconscious. From our subconscious, they come onto the screen of the mind. But the intellect can also place thoughts. The intellect can place high quality thoughts, such as, I am the peaceful soul who lives in this body. And we have this thought, and then the intellect also is the one who understands that I, the soul, am separate from the body. I'm not made of matter so that I cannot be seen, but I can be understood. The intellect understands. I can understand myself to be a non material, energetic being of spiritual light. The intellect understands that consciousness is different from matter. And the intellect can both understand the world of matter and the world of spirit. I am a peaceful soul. I live in this body. And the better I know myself, the more I enjoy my own company. I have within me the energy of love, which is essential for life. Babies who are abandoned and not loved can actually die because love is essential for life, for the life of the body as well as the life of the soul. Those who are not loved properly become disturbed and possibly even violent because love is so important. And that energy of love is within me, the soul. And so the intellect can decide, instead of just letting random thoughts come onto my mind, let me choose some purposeful thoughts. Bring your awareness to that deep center part of the self, the still and silent core, and then touch that place of love. Let the energy of love flow. And this is the power of the intellect. The intellect can activate the qualities of the soul. Now, the difficulty with this is that if the intellect is under the influence of the ego, then the intellect can activate anger or greed or jealousy or fear, all kinds of negative qualities. So we have to keep the intellect connected with this inner place of light. I'm a peaceful soul. I have within me many good qualities, energies. And now I'm going to activate the energy of love very softly and gently. Let the energy of love flow. It's such a subtle energy. And let my whole being be filled with love. The intellect can remind the mind it's so important for us to feel love. Love is nourishment for the soul. And the intellect also recognizes that love is a limitless resource, which we can use in many different ways. One way is to support the body with the energy of love. Let the energy of love flow. Into the body. Let the whole body be filled with the energy of love. love and appreciation. All the way to the fingers, the toes. Definitely fill the brain with the energy of love. Another way that the intellect can use the resource of love is to improve relationships. And so, if there is a relationship that could be better, it has some conflict or resistance or disagreement in it, or maybe simply a lack of understanding, I can visualize that soul and then, with the power of my thought, send that soul love. The intellect is using the power of the mind to send love, understanding, friendship. This changes our attitude about the other person, but also this energy can touch the soul and soften the soul. Send the energy of love to some soul with whom you could have a better relationship. Not a difficult relationship, it's simply a relationship that could be better with a little more understanding. When we see ourselves as beings of love, then the intellect can understand the supremely loving soul, the one who is known as the supreme love. The intellect can understand a being who is completely eternally loving. And then the intellect is attracted to that being, that completely unique being, perfect, pure love. Let yourself be drawn into the company of the being who is always loving, whose love is pure and uncontaminated. It has no conditions. It's free flowing. The intellect can understand God. We can't see God with our eyes, but the intellect with the third eye can understand. This beautiful being, gentle light, a source of wisdom and security. And the energy who can bring out the best in me. In the company of this perfectly loving being, my eternally loving nature emerges. I also am a being of eternal love. It's just that I forget this from time to time. But that is my truth. I am eternally a being of love. A child of God, a soul. Now hold this awareness of yourself as a being of love. Bring your awareness back to the body that you inhabit and the life that you have created for yourself. And remind yourself of the importance of the intellect, the invisible intellect, the behind the scenes intellect. Can choose positive thoughts, productive thoughts. Put them on the mind. And the intellect can understand. The intellect knows the difference between a thought that's positive and helpful and productive and a thought that is dangerous or harmful. So remember to honor your intellect. Feed the intellect the nourishing food of love. Om Shanti. Our blessing card for today. Nice rose. You are a sweet soul who understands that love can see beyond misunderstandings. Easy for you to see that. You are a sweet soul who sees that love, who understands that love can see beyond misunderstandings. Enjoy your blessing.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Okay.
Also to you.
Thank you.
Mary,